name is Lacey Sheldon, and I am the Youth Services Director and Librarian at McIntosh Memorial Library in Viroqua, Wisconsin. And today I'm so happy to welcome my friend and former classmate, Nicole Brudos Irungu. Thanks, Nicole, for being here. In July, the library is acknowledging Immigration and Refugee Status Awareness Month. And Nicole is here to talk about immigration and refugee statuses in Kenya, and also to let us know about her personal life journey of what has taken her from Viroqua all the way to Nairobi, Kenya. And I'd be very happy to read Nicole's bio for us. Nicole Irungu Brudos was born in Viroqua and graduated from Viroqua High School in 2002. She has lived and worked in Nairobi, Kenya since 2009. She is the RSC Deputy Director at Church World Service Resettlement Support Center, which is a program that assists the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. Nicole has a master's degree in nonprofit leadership and management from the Arizona State University and a bachelor's degree in family social science from the University of Minnesota. She is married to Dominic Irungu and has two sons, Aiden, who's 5, and Liam, who is 3 years old. Thank you again, Nicole. I'm so excited to hear from you, and so happy that you're live right now in Nairobi, Kenya. What an excellent treat for us. Thank you so
much. Yes, Lacey, thank you. And hi, everyone.
Let's see, Nicole. So Nicole, let's talk a little bit about where you're from, the place that is connecting us all here at this moment, hometown of Viroqua, Wisconsin.
Yes.
Nicole and I went to high school together, and we graduated together as well. I would think we were in kindergarten all the way through high school graduation date, huh?
It is. Yes.
Yes, it's just so great.
Yeah.
So Nicole, after high school though, so you had gone to the University of Minnesota and graduated from Minnesota. And then at what time did you become interested in the organization that you work for now?
Yeah, so I started my university career at UW-Whitewater, and I thought I was gonna be in business and marketing and be that, suited up professional in working in a corner office of a skyscraper building in some metropolitan city. And then I realized that that wasn't for me. And the town of Whitewater was very small and comparable to Viroqua in some ways. So I decided to transfer to the University of Minnesota. And in Minneapolis, Minnesota, they house a lot of refugees. This huge Somali population there, huge Ethiopian refugee population there. And I, through university, met a lot of former refugees who were refugees in Kenya. Mm-hmm. And they told me how great Kenya was. Mm-hmm. And there was a study abroad program that the University of Minnesota had to Kenya. So in 2005, I was a junior at the university, and I studied abroad in Kenya. And I was able to land an internship, which was a very rare and unique opportunity with the UN to intern in a refugee camp in Kenya. So that's how I came across the organization. When I was interning there, a group of folks who were working at my organization now came to visit us in the refugee camp. And I was so excited because they were fellow Americans around, and I could speak with my thick Wisconsin accent, and we enjoyed each other. And they're the ones who told me about the job and the work that they were doing in Kenya.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is in itself just amazing. Yeah. Oh my gosh, thank you, Nicole, for explaining that. Do you want to tell us more about sort of work into that, all of the experiences that you've had while being introduced to the organization? Tell us a little bit more about the organization, what it does, your path through that.
Yeah. So Church World Service is the nonprofit organization that is funded by the US government to operate what is called the Resettlement Support Center in sub-Saharan Africa. There are 7 resettlement support centers around the world that the US government funds through different nonprofits. And the work we do simply is to fill out US refugee immigration paperwork, right? So we go around and we see refugees in 49 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, so pretty much the whole continent. And these are refugees from most populations being Congolese, Somalis, Ethiopians, South Sudanese, and in various refugee camps on the continent. These cases are referred to us by the United Nations, and the US government then accepts them into the program. We fill out their paperwork, and then a US immigration officer approves or denies their case for entry into the United States. So these are folks who are pre-approved to enter the United States on refugee status. So it's a super unique job. You know, one of the questions you wanted to know was, you know, what do I like about this job? Well, I really enjoy this job because I started working as an entry-level caseworker in 2009. And 12 and a half years later, I'm still here, and now I'm the deputy director of the organization. But I really enjoy most our mission in helping people. Yes, resettlement to the United States is not an option for everyone, but through the UN and selecting the most vulnerable cases, it really gives such a good opportunity for a lot of folks to start over in the US and just have a safe place to live. I really love the diversity of my job. So not only have I had an opportunity to travel all over sub-Saharan Africa, it's really also hands-on work, you know, and going to places that you normally wouldn't go to, and you wouldn't take a vacation to some of these places, and you don't even have access to some of these places. So the diversity of the populations and the places I work is just really amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. It's just really already opening up my mind to so much more of the work and the mission that you have, Nicole. It's really, really profound and really beautiful. So you were talking about that entry-level position. Could you talk a little bit more about that? How many people would be in that position? Who comes forward to step into that position, do you see in the organization?
Yes. So currently we are at about 380 staff, and we have offices in 3 countries. Our main office is in Nairobi, Kenya. We have another office in remote Tanzania and another one in Pretoria, South Africa. The majority of our staff are local national hires, but we do reserve a few spots for international hires, and specifically US passport holders or American citizens, because there's a couple steps in the process on certain cases that an American citizen needs to complete. But who we're looking for the entry-level senior caseworker position is folks that hold a bachelor's degree, who potentially have some international travel exposure or any humanitarian social service sort of work in the States, or any US refugee experience through volunteer opportunities or helping refugees resettle and settle into the US. So a really good candidate is somebody who's a humanitarian at heart, who can handle hearing and recording very gruesome and heartbreaking stories from the refugees,
Mm-hmm.
and someone who can handle really challenging work environments, meaning, there's no air conditioning, there's mosquitoes flying around you, you're sweating and you still have to type on the computer, the power goes out and you might lose your work. And so, but that's what I was attracted to, and it makes life a little more fun, I guess.
Yeah, there's so much to gather from that type of work, the environment, getting to know people on that very human level. It's so impactful what people are going through if they are already stepping into the need to have this service in their lives, right? So there's some real atrocities that happen in this world, and it seems like there's a lot of great efforts being made by the organization to relocate people to save lives, really, right? Do you know, and I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, and if you don't, that's okay, but how many people are in the refugee status that are accepted into the program and relocated on an annual basis, or any type of time frame that you may know of?
Mm-hmm. So the U.S. refugee program, just let me clarify. There are asylum seekers that find their own way on U.S. soil, and then they go for their asylum hearing, and they're granted asylee status or not. Mm-hmm. And we don't work with that side of the house. We work with pre-approved people coming into the United States, pre-approved refugee status. Mm-hmm. And so the President of the United States, through an executive order, signs annually what the refugee admissions number is going to be. Oh. And that is something that single-handedly the President of the United States has full authority to select that number. Mm-hmm. And the number has been extremely low, but it has gone up. So the former president, the last year he was in office, I believe the number was 15,000 individuals. Mm-hmm. The number currently that we are processing for this year is 65,000 individuals. Wow. Yeah. However, the program is very much vetted, and it's not an easy process. The average case from start to finish of the U.S. program is about 3 years of processing. Wow. And it can even be longer than that. Yeah. Extensive background checks are done. We have to fill out the immigration paperwork. The U.S. immigration officer has to come out. COVID alone, I would say, is probably going to bump our average case processing time to probably 4 years, because very little processing happened during COVID, 2020. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. That definitely answered my question. It's a lot of information to take in there, and a lot that you process and direct as well. As the director, what do you have your hands on specifically?
So I oversee the teams going out and meeting directly with the refugees and the teams that are processing the cases. We have to make sure we are operating under the U.S. government's policies and processes, and making sure every step of the process is monitored, quality control checked. Currently, we are transitioning databases, which has never happened in the history of the program. So this is a huge initiative. And we just completed our 3-week training on the new database. And our pipeline alone in East Africa is a little over 100,000 individuals. So basically, we are overseeing my organization. We are overseeing over 100,000 people's lives. Wow. And trying to work through and move those folks through the process. Most people are approved by U.S. immigration. The approval rate is roughly, for the cases I work on, is roughly a 90 to 95% approval rate. So it's actually very rare that someone is denied, because so much vetting has gone through the process with the UN and US protocols before a case even goes to a US immigration officer.
Wow. Thank you for letting us know that, Nicole. That's amazing. We're certainly proud of you. I am very proud of you. I have a question about the refugees and their family units. What does that look like for a family unit that wants to resettle together? I'd imagine that they're very much entwined and kept together in the paperwork and also in the movement, yes?
Yes, so we have cross-reference cases. A lot of times what can happen is sibling groups are referred. So let's use that as an example, where each sibling has their own family, maybe their spouse, their children, but they want to maintain that connection. So the program is set up to maintain family unity as much as possible. And what will happen is, maybe the cases in that instance, the sibling groups and their families don't need to live in the same house, and they don't necessarily need to travel on the same exact airplane. But what we do want is that that whole family of siblings goes to the same city in the United States. So if my case was approved first, I could travel, and then 6 months later, my brother can come and come to the same city with me. And so we track all of that through the database and make sure all of that happens. So it's very much a family unity. What else is really great is if somebody has a child that went missing and that child is found a few years later, we're able to track in the database so that child can go to their parent in the US. Wow.
Wow. That personally just gave me some chills in a good way. Just like, that's so powerful. That's really incredible. When we're talking about people coming and being resettled into the United States, and how are the cities chosen? Is there a preference? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's identified resettlement agencies in the US. And Church World Service, my organization, runs a few of the resettlement agencies. Other organizations like Lutheran Social Services, Catholic Charities, and a few others run resettlement agencies. I know in Wisconsin, Green Bay takes in a few refugees. In Minnesota, it's obviously Minneapolis, Rochester. So it's wherever these organizations are placed to then accept refugees and help them settle in. Because a lot happens on the US side, finding apartments, getting the kids enrolled in school, even showing how to use the public transportation to get groceries, all of these things. What else can be really helpful, and what mostly happens, is there's little niches of different refugee ethnic groups. Minnesota is known for the Somali population, and there's other cities around that are known for other populations. And that actually can help refugees come, because they already have a community base. They probably already have friends once they start meeting people there. And there's also an opportunity for you to put down on your case if you know somebody in the US. So I could say, hey, my buddy Lacey was resettled, to Minneapolis, Minnesota. I know her. Let me go, live there by her, because she'll help me with something, I'm sure, even though you're formally not expected to help with something. But, having a community is so great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Nicole. That really answered my question. I think maybe now it'd be nice to take a pause, open up for a Q&A to everyone who's joined us here today. Maybe anyone else out there has a burning question. You're welcome to unmute to ask your question. You could also type it in the chat box if you'd like. asking any questions of Nicole that of topics that we've covered thus far. Anyone has any thoughts on that? Give it a moment.
Well, if nobody else does, I definitely do. And this is kind of like a little bit of a complicated question, so take the piece you want to run with. What are some of like the barriers that you see throughout your work? And that could either mean like on the refugee side or you personally, or like the US side, either like before or after they have immigrated to the US.
Barriers. You know, I wish the process wasn't so bureaucratic, and it can be very slow. So I'll give you, so if we broke down the process to get a refugee to actually fly out to the United States, and if we say the process has like 10 steps, and you work your way through each step, what can happen a lot of times is if someone dies in your immediate family, if you give birth to a baby, if you get married, if you get divorced, you have to go back some steps. So if the process takes like 3.5 years to get through 10 steps, and you're on step 7 and you give birth to a baby, you might have to go back to step 2 and start over. And it's really interesting. I mean, just the government protocols and the bureaucracy about, does a newborn baby need a full background check? Like, I mean, what activity? This child barely has its eyes open. I don't think we have to run a full security screening on this child, but it's just the way it is in some instances. And they have to go through the steps. And so I've actually counseled some families, which family planning is a sensitive topic and based on cultural or religious beliefs. But, I've had to have a couple heart-to-hearts with families to be like, if you really want to go to the US and take these children you have to the US, try to give it a break on the babies, because, there was like one case who was stuck in processing for 10 or 12 years because I think they had 5 children during that time. So that's a barrier I see, but otherwise.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Sarah has a question. Oh, I'm going to help unmute you, Sarah. There you go.
There we go. I'm curious about so say there's someone in Kenya who desires to come to the United States. I'm curious about what has prompted this. Like, why would they want to come to the United States? And what is their, like, do you have a full range of economic status of people who are refugees? What makes a refugee? What makes a refugee from someone who lives next door, who might want to go to the United States just because, whatever, or someone who's in pretty desperate straits? I'm curious about that gamut.
So we define refugee as somebody who fled their home country and are seeking refuge in another country. So the refugees that are in the refugee camps in Kenya are actually Somalis, Congolese, South Sudanese, Ethiopians, and they are in refugee camps in Kenya. Another criteria for the US to deem and grant refugee status is you have to show that you will be persecuted and harmed if you return to your home country. So you have to make a claim of, I am going to be killed if I return to my home because of my tribe, because I am a Christian living in a Muslim nation, because I am a woman, because I'm LGBTI. So you have to make a claim, And then that's how you're granted refugee status. So actually Kenyans, in my 12 years working on the program, there's only one or two Kenyan nationals that I saw trying to seek refugee status. So there's not a lot of Kenyan refugees. These are more Somalis, Ethiopians, Congolese, South Sudanese.
Wow.
As an adjunct to that question, tell me more about the refugee camps.
So every camp is different. Every country in Africa operates their camps differently. It's a joint effort between the governments of those countries who host refugees and the UN. Some places like Uganda has really nice refugee camps, and they actually don't even call them refugee camps, they call them settlements. And in Kenya, we are thankful that they are still operating their refugee camps, but the refugee camps are in the very northern parts of Kenya, very desert areas and very undesirable land. And so every country is different. Every refugee camp is kind of operated in a different way.
Thank you for your question, Sarah. Thank you for the answer, Nicole. Do you have another question, Sarah?
I do. So can you, I'd like to picture, you say it's in a very sort of deserty, undesirable land. What does Kenya support them with food, with how are the children? Are they in school? Is there sort of a sense of community within each of the camps? How many people are in each place?
Yeah, so it's definitely a few thousand, even a couple 100,000. These refugee camps are on the border of, in northern Kenya. One is on the border of Somalia, and one is on the Turkana side, near Lake Turkana. And the host governments, for the most part, do not give any funding. They give access to the land. It's a lot of nonprofit organizations that come in, and the World Food Program, Care International, Save the Children, so many international organizations all play a role in operating schools, healthcare, food, drink, all basic needs. There's care packages when you arrive. And so it's operated by other international organizations.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions in the with the group that has gathered here today? Thinking of anything? Well, if you happen to think of a question, you can always let me know by putting it in the chat and I can read it to Nicole. And maybe we can switch gears here a little bit. We've been hearing from Nicole about the work that she's doing with World Church Services. We've been hearing about the refugee settlements and their cases and what that looks like for that process to relocate people, refugees from sub-Saharan Africa to the United States. And perhaps we could hear a little bit more about the your COVID experience, Nicole, and what was that like in Africa, and for your own personal experience, if you'd like to go into that.
Yeah, so mid to end March of 2020, the US embassies around the world advised their US citizens to return home. And I've experienced a lot of different turmoil, presidential elections, some civil unrest. And I've never seen an announcement from the US Embassy encouraging citizens to get back home because they didn't know how much support they could extend if things got really bad with COVID. Given our situation here in Nairobi, not only was I facing, for me and my family, looking at the health concerns and truly what is a pandemic, but then also looking at the fragile economy in Nairobi and thinking about, okay, if people fall really sick and there's limited health care, crime rates are going to go up and things could get really bad. So my family and I, my husband and my 2 children, we made the decision to get on the flights, and we actually took one of the last flights out of Kenya. Wow. And, you know, flew back to the States, and we arrived really late at night, 10 p.m. or midnight. And my mom and my brother Mike picked us up at the airport and drove us home to Viroqua. And it was, we hung out, we lived in Viroqua, at my brother's house and my mom's house. We were changing houses every few months, but we were in Viroqua for a year. And so it was really interesting. We had no idea when we were coming to Viroqua how long it was going to be. You know, I mean, none of us knew really what COVID was and how long is a pandemic. And so we thought it would be 2-3 months at most, and it turned out to be a year. So we've just been back in Kenya for a couple months, but we were really happy being home. Unfortunately, the vaccine rollout here in Kenya and in Africa as a whole is really, really slow. For the most part, we are still living kind of a isolated lifestyle, mask mandates. Schools are kind of going in and out of closing sometimes. If we have influxes of cases, positive cases. So we're in a very different lifestyle here in Kenya than what you folks are seeing stateside.
Wow. Thank you for explaining that, Nicole. That's really, really something. I could imagine just the whole process of that. Like, okay, family, we are headed back to stateside. We're going to the, you know, the driftless homeland. The driftless homeland, very different than the Kenyan homeland, right? I believe I remember you and your husband and sons had been to Viroqua before, though. Yes, on a few trips. Liam, your youngest, had he been to Viroqua before the COVID trip? Yeah. Oh, yeah, so much to adjust to being in all the 4 seasons over the course of a year, yes?
Yeah.
Plus having so many things closed during that time as well. It's just, for all of us, just a really bunkered down sort of scenario.
Yeah, I do want to say the library saved us. In Kenya, we do not really have public libraries. So the fact that the boys could get new books in their book bundles every week or two, and we were renting movies, and I was going to the library to study when it was available. The library was really our big outing, big treat during COVID. So thank you. And then the library team.
Yeah, absolutely. We all rallied as much as we could to keep this essential community hub operating to the best that we could, definitely. That's great. Thinking of COVID as well, how was that experience for people who have a refugee status in Africa? Not that you weren't necessarily there, but your work continued while you were here in the States. And what did that look like for you, Nicole? And also for them?
Yeah, actually, it's slowed down our process. A lot of our partners, you know, everybody is still kind of in a work from home posture, maybe giving approvals for really critical missions to go out. But what we were experiencing mainly is our refugees who were approved to travel to the US. When they were getting their pre-departure COVID tests, the positivity rate was extremely high. And what was happening is if you have a family of 5 people, let's say, maybe the mom tests positive, we quarantine her, and then retest the family. Oh, now the dad is positive. And then, and then, you know, and so it was taking and it still is taking a long time to get larger family groups, all negative COVID tests, so that they can have that paperwork and negative tests to fly out to the United States.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I can see where that definitely adds in a lot of extra time for these people who are waiting to start the next chapter of their lives, essentially. Boy, that must add extra complications to everything.
Definitely.
Definitely. Let's see. Are there any other questions about the COVID pandemic and what Nicole's experienced on a personal level, or that perhaps the refugees in Kenya were experiencing? I know that there's so many different nuances to that, and overall the whole the answer is it's just hard and scary and adds a lot of extra challenge and complications to things, but yet the work continues, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, what are some of your hopes for Kenya and Kenya, your staff, and also the people who have refugee status as you move forward in weeks and months to come?
So for my staff and team, it's going to be us having access to the vaccine. It's like the definition of explaining a frontline worker. I do have to say that the places we go to in the remote locations have very limited healthcare. I've even had times of like, oh goodness, if I were to break my ankle right now, twist my ankle, I don't even know where I would go, or a snake bite. And I'm hoping that we'll have access to vaccines. Unfortunately, my organization, we did lose a staff member due to COVID. So that was really unfortunate. And it was just, it was a real wake up and reality check about just how limited healthcare is here. And in Kenya, we don't even have 911. Your best hope for getting an ambulance to your house is if you have a private ambulance number that's actually, and it's of some ambulance that's actually going to pick up the phone and come to your home. So I just hope safety of my team. I hope vaccines come to Kenya, and hope is on the way soon. We're not out of the woods with the pandemic. The Delta variant is just hitting us, and we'll peak out. We're starting to increase cases now, and we'll be in a high peak through the end of July into early August with the Delta variant. In terms of hopes for refugees, it's going to be interesting to me to see how the pandemic and the added stress of the pandemic, what that's going to do for the refugee populations, meaning, are people in extra desperation? Do we all have COVID fatigue and other mental stressors? And is that going to cause people to do very irrational things and have more war-torn flare-ups just because of all the extra frustration and stress? So I'll be curious to see if that has an impact on the population, but I hope not. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. We certainly hope that's not the case as well. There's already so much in life, and then just like you reminding us, there's still, the world has a lot further to go before we're all on the mend. Sarah has a question.
Yeah. So I sort of am thinking of these refugee camps as sort of complete. But I'm imagining now that there might be people coming every day from different countries. So you have people at the camps who have been there for years, and then you have people who come just new every day, week after week, month after month, year after year. Could you explain how they do they go into quarantine, or do they just put everybody together? How does that work? Is it like neighborhoods or just a bunch of tents or what?
Yeah. There's new arrival intake. And so basically a lot of refugees walk on foot and find the refugee camp after days and days and days of walking. And the UN will give them temporary housing, food, water, basically welcome to the refugee camp. And then they are formally registered into the system because the UN and the host government keep a database of everybody in system. And this is really helpful because you can trace family members that way and just, keep record of who is in the refugee camp. And then they'll go into their permanent housing. And permanent housing, well, I shouldn't really use the word permanent because some refugee camps operate off of tents. Some will give you supplies to build, a traditional mud hut, or give you metal sheeting to put on a roof. And then every refugee camp's different in terms of the neighborhoods that they create inside. What can be hard is how do you put people in the camps and still keep the peace? Because when war happens, people from both sides of the war need to seek refuge. And so how do you keep the balance of, you might just think like, oh, these are two Congolese people, they'll be friends, when really they could have been on opposite sides of the war. So of course, when you do that registration, you put down your tribe and where you came from particularly, and they do collect a little bit of information on your initial reasons why you left your country. And so, yeah, it's complex and interesting, and managing and all the organizations involved of keeping these refugee camps up and running. It's a serious effort.
So would you say, are there a lot of, is it like civil wars in these countries, or is it like the wealthy are warring, or, I'm just trying to understand, is the refugee situation something that has been happening for like hundreds of years, or is this a relatively new phenomenon in the last 50 years? Or, I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, some of these wars have been going on for a long time. In Africa, on the continent of Africa, usually our refugees, it's due to tribal issues. And who's in power in the government, and maybe overthrowing the government, or you want your people in power, but it's usually tribal. And things just get heated and conflicts break out.
Yeah. Thank you for your question, Sarah. Thanks for providing those answers, Nicole. It's really heartbreaking in so many ways, that so many people are affected to the point where they need to flee a place, their homes, to save their own lives. And I think that's the hugely compassionate part of being a humanitarian, right? As you were saying, Nicole, of like, what can be done to assist people who really need that support. It's really profound, super profound. So now that we've covered those, and speaking about COVID, I wanted to switch gears a bit here in our last few minutes, Nicole, and hear about you, Kenya, and your family life. I know that's quite a reversal, but in all of this, you're there doing this amazing, important work. And you have your small growing family, and your family's thriving, and you're now back in Kenya. And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so like I said, or maybe some people weren't on the call, we just moved into a standalone home, which means we have our home in its own compound, and we have a yard, and we were in an apartment before. And so that's really been life-changing. We're in this beautiful, quiet neighborhood, just gorgeous. And we actually, our house is about a 5-minute walk from the National Forest here in Nairobi. And my 2 sons go to an outdoor nature-based school, and that's been really, really great. It's a combination between nature-based learning, Montessori, and Waldorf. And their school actually is in the forest as well. So the boys even know how to like get the monkeys away when it's snack time. And there's this whole like, look out for monkeys, and they do this dance that scares them away. So it's been a really great experience for them, growing up here and just all of that. I mean, one thing I appreciate about living in Kenya and Nairobi is the food is really good. Like the fresh produce. I mean, you know, in my yard alone, and I don't even have a huge yard. I have the pomegranate tree, a mango tree, 2 avocado trees, and banana trees. And so like, that's phenomenal, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah. And so it's a really, really unique lifestyle. And I love Nairobi. It's a metropolitan hub. You know, Nairobi is a huge city. It's 4.5 million people live in Nairobi.
Big.
And it's really eclectic. Like I said, it's the East Africa hub. So there's a lot of headquartered international organizations, a lot of really great food and restaurants. So I've really enjoyed my time, you know, it's definitely, I don't ever feel like I'm forced to be here or it's torturous being here. I mean, I've chosen to live here for 12.5 years now. And I really don't even see myself moving home anytime soon. I know we'll move back to Wisconsin or Minnesota area at some point, because I might want my sons to go to high school in the States. But we're really enjoying our time in Kenya.
That's amazing. That's just so great in that way. And your family has visited from Viroqua area to Kenya as well. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
For
my mother. Yeah, my wedding. And both of my brothers came out, and my mom and my auntie and a couple girlfriends.
Nice.
And then my mom visits at least once a year. And I'm trying to get everyone else to come out for a second visit or two. So yeah, it's great. I mean, what's really cool about Kenya is we have, if you're into mountain climbing, there's Mount Kenya, Mount Kilimanjaro. If you're into scuba diving, there's the Kenyan coast on the Indian Ocean. We also have the Great Rift Valley, which is really interesting. And that's where a lot of the first Homo sapien skeletons were found. And there's a lot of like really archaeological history in the Rift Valley. So it's a cool place to just do outdoor activities. Like right now, the wildebeest migration is happening in the Masai Mara. And so, yeah, never ending. I mean, to do like, to say that you went on safari for like a weekend, you know, like, oh, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, I went on safari, you know? Like,
right. Well,
cool.
That sounds, it's always definitely been at the top of top of my list to be able to visit sub-Saharan Africa there in Kenya. Absolutely. It sounds absolutely incredible. I had another question too, but I can't think of it in this exact moment. So let's see if anyone who's gathered here today has a question for Nicole.
Yeah, I know I mentioned this to you before that I've been there to Africa, to Kenya, and I was told to pronounce it that way because it was in 1997. So they'd only had independence from England for, I believe it was 12 years. And it was pretty phenomenal for me on many levels. I was just 17 years old, but 1976 was a really big year in the United States as far as like independence and all these celebrations. And then to go to Africa and Kenya and hear how it had only been 12 years since they were independent, and what that looks like and how hard it is to establish as an independent country when you've been molded and kept from establishing your own identity as a country by another country. So that was interesting. Mm-hmm. And then just traveling around, I spent, I was going to say when we were in Nairobi, I went to see the opening of Star Wars, and then it was Mary Poppins on the same movie. Double feature in Nairobi was Mary Poppins and Star Wars. But just the clouds and the bugs, and going to Mount Kenya and climbing up as far as we could, and just taking all these amazing pictures. And then we were in Lake Nakuru area for a while, which is in the Rift Valley. And there's a lake there that's only about 4 feet deep, and it's a salt lake, and it's where all the flamingos come. So, and then just being like the only white person on the whole stretch of the road, and feeling safe, and yet at the same time, not everybody wants to be greeted, and just how to find that balance of being respectful and yet also open to greeting others. And so I guess I'm curious just how it is for you being a white person, if there's issues there. And then alternatively, if you had, if Dominic experienced some racism here in Viroqua. Thanks.
Yeah. Being a white person in Nairobi these days, people don't even bat an eye. You stand out more when you go to the more rural parts. But it's nothing I can't handle, and nothing rude. Usually the assumption is if you're white, it's more positive things like you're wealthy, you're educated, you're a doctor, you're a missionary. So it's nothing that negative. In terms of my family being in Viroqua, everybody was super welcoming. A lot of people know Dominic by now and my boys. And so it was just a really, really great experience. And it felt good to be home and spend the time during COVID in Viroqua. It was really great.
Good. I'm really happy to hear that. That's, welcoming you home from having been living so far away for over a decade, and to have you back in your hometown. I guess, for me on a personal level, since we'd gone to school all those years, Nicole, it was just really great to get to see you and refamiliarize even during the time of COVID. So I think that brings us to maybe some final remarks, Nicole, seeing a lasting impression that you'd like us to know about the work that you do, and any other thoughts that you may have.
Yeah. The work that I do, it's really one step in the process, where so many players and so many people take up such a big role in it. I do want to say that working with refugees, to be honest, they are some of the most vulnerable people in the world, and have had some of the most horrible things happen to them, and a lot of horrible things happen to them. And seeing their resilience and them overcoming and thriving in the United States to really start over, become educated, be top leaders. You know, I personally have Somali friends who I went to university with, and now they are going back to Somalia and starting organizations and trying to be leaders in the government and really break the cycle of the war-torn country of Somalia and trying to make a difference. And, you know, I really want to thank America and Americans for that opportunity. And there's other countries in the world that resettle refugees as well. Canada, the UK, Australia, Sweden. But the US by far and large takes in the most refugees. And I believe that's what our country was founded on. All of our ancestors came to the US for one reason or another and started a new life and made a difference. And so it's a really beautiful thing. And I really see the benefits of refugee resettlement and just paying it forward and trying to break the cycle and just really pull people up. So that's what's really drawn me to this work is trying to make a difference somehow.
That's amazing, Nicole. Thank you so much for your words and for your time today. And that made me remember, what time is it in Kenya right now?
It's almost 7:30 at night.
Okay. And here right now it is 11:30 in the afternoon. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, Nicole. It really means a lot to hear from you, working so closely with the organizations, and to learn. I've learned so much in this hour today. Thank you.
Great. All right.
Thank you,
everybody.
Nicole. Take care.
Okay. Kwaheri.